been looking for CEO jobs seriously, Ryan, for well over a year. So I was actually quite frustrated. Stock market's booming and like everything is up and to the right. And I'm like, wait, I'm on the sidelines. Am I missing my time?
I am fascinated by how people earn jobs. How does it all work?
I said, there are 4 things I want in this job. Number 1, I want macro tailwinds and I want to play in a good market. Number 2, I was like, I want a customer I can get passionate about. Number 3, I said, it has to have a really good business model. Number 4, I said, the CEO job has to be available and I need to be able to learn for miles. In the interview process, you should be building a thesis and you should build a deck for yourself. You have the 10 slides on what you would do if you were in the job.
Is that a deck that you're willing to share? All right, Sukhinder, great to have you back on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome.
Thank you, and congrats on all the continued success since we last spoke.
Thank you. And you too. I remember when I saw the press release come out that you chose to take the CEO role at Xero, and I thought, wait a second, Xero, that's what I use. I remember when
I'm so happy to hear that.
I teamed up with my accounting firm that I work with, and they say, hey, we love Xero. It's the best for our clients, and that's what we use. And I said, great, sounds good to me. And I've been using it ever since, and it's been great. So it's kind of cool that this product I already used before, and now you're the CEO. So I am curious, though. Last time we talked, you're kind of promoting your book. You're in between roles. You're thinking of what to do next. What made you say, you know what? I think Xero is the place for me. That's where I want to go run that company.
Well, first of all, you're going to laugh because when I got the Xero call, I said the same thing you did. I was like, oh, my tiny startup, the Board List, which was always been my side hustle, a governance platform where people can find great leaders for boards, was also a Xero user. So interestingly, when I got the call, I said to my husband, believe it or not, I was like, I know Xero. I'm pretty sure this is the one. Now, I mean, if you zoom back and you say, why is it the one? You pointed out a couple things that are important. I had, we'd sold StubHub, managed it through the COVID crisis. I wrote the book, and I had been looking for CEO jobs seriously, Ryan, for well over a year. So I was actually quite frustrated. I was like, and by the way, this is like 2020, 2021, like stock market's booming. Everybody, and I'm like, wait, I'm on the sidelines and like everything is up and to the right. Like, am I missing my time? Interestingly, by the time I took Xero, things were starting to already, have crusted, and like we were entering this era of like profits plus efficiency. But okay, so all the way back to the story. Why did I say yes? I said yes because I not only knew the product, but because in my looking, I said there are 4 things I want in this job. Number 1, I want macro tailwinds and I want to play in a good market. And I'll say to people like, look, you can be the best person in the world, but you'd rather go where the fish are, swim with the tide. And the digitization of small businesses, particularly the back office, is still a growing sector. Number 2, I was like, I want a customer I can get passionate about. So I had told recruiters, look, I love consumer. Consumer's a hard business in tech. I said, I also love small business. I need to be able to empathize with the user. And as you and I both know, we're both small business owners. We've both been founders. So that resonated. I knew the product, to your point. I used the product. Number 3, I said, it has to have a really good business model. Number 4, I said, the CEO job has to be available and I need to be able to learn for miles. And the last one's important because, look, I'm in my 50s now and I think I have tons of energy, but, maybe you can relate. For a lot of my career, it was like, well, it's not this job, there's another job. I'm on a journey, right? And after StubHub, I was like, no, I just want the job. I don't want the job before the job or the job that leads to the next job. I just want the job where for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, like I feel continually challenged. And I've actually cut out a lot of choices, a lot. So I had this really high criteria, and believe it or not, there was only Xero and one other company in the course of a year and a half that met that bar.
I am fascinated by how people earn jobs and going like inside the process. Like, did you go after them? They come after you, mutual? What's the process like once you say, okay, they meet my criteria? How does it all work? How did this case all work for you?
Well, interestingly, you say this. So first of all, you can imagine my worry, frustration, concern that I'm like, where are all the great CEO jobs? So first of all, CEO jobs are opaque. So while you can raise your hand, I mean, these processes tend to go the other way, which is you don't know what, like it's not like it's not posted mostly on LinkedIn. This is a private process. It can be passive, it can be active. Almost all the big ones are run by headhunters. So generally, you tend to get these calls. You can't just say, gee, I'd like to be CEO of your company. In the background, for whatever it's worth, I was working on 2 roll-up ideas because I was frustrated that, like, if I didn't see the right CEO job, could I make my own luck? Do you know what I mean? Could I go take a thesis and build a company at scale? Because I was looking for scale. So the way it happens is, you typically get recruiter calls in both the CEO cases I was talking about. I got them. But the inside process for Xero was really fun for a few reasons. Number one, it went very fast. I think from the moment we started chatting, which is the beginning of September-ish, to the moment I got the offer, which was mid-October, that's a 3-month process. So they moved with intention, which I appreciated. It was very clear, there was a first round, a second round, and a final round, in which there's always, if you're a CEO, there's almost always like a board presentation, and I had a board presentation. And in between, the fun second round was they said, come visit XeroCon. XeroCon is like the TED of for accountants and bookkeepers. It's like a conference of 3 or 4,000 people. We do them around the world. So now, of course, I am at XeroCon, but I attended the first XeroCon in stealth. I was in the audience. Nobody knew. I was sitting among thousands of Xero customers watching the current CEO. And by the way, it was the CEO had announced his transition. So, to the board, not publicly. So it was a very managed process, done collaboratively with the CEO. So I met the CEO, but I was sitting in the crowd and nobody knew I was the contender for the job, watching the current CEO present, which kind of fueled my conviction on the opportunity. And then by the final round, yes, the board asked me to present a vision. And I think I always say on a CEO job, this is probably the most important thing, because somebody just called me who's interviewing for CEO role and asked for advice on what she should consider. And I said, hey, in the interview process, you should be building a thesis and you should build a deck for yourself, whether or not you ever present it to the board, such that by the time you enter your final rounds, you have the 10 slides on what you would do if you were in the job. And those 10 slides are either going to give you the conviction that this is an amazing opportunity because you know what you would do and can imagine your game plan for the next 24 months. By the way, it's a thesis, of course, because once you're in, you're going to learn a lot more. But it's just when people say imagine the first 100 days on the job, I'm like, if you're CEO, I think you have to imagine the first 24 months on the job. And what you do. What are the moves you would make? What's your thesis on how your coming to this organization can help unlock or accelerate its impact? And so I did have a 10-slide deck, and luckily for me, the board, I guess, liked what I had to say, and away
Is
we
that a
go.
deck that you're willing to share?
I'll ask the Xero board. I don't know if they'd be willing to share. Probably not, but I will say I
I would
probably
just, I personally, maybe we could talk separately. I'd love to see it because I love the process of how people earn big jobs. I think it's really cool to think about. Maybe we could talk about some of the things that you are allowed to share. What goes in it? If let's say somebody, so could there maybe not even a CEO job, but they're going for a leadership role, because I think you should do this even if you're just going for your first ever management job. You should take it seriously, prepare, over prepare, have a thesis statement, create a deck. I mean, it couldn't hurt to do this, even if you don't end up presenting it. It couldn't hurt. So let's say somebody's in that type of job, because it's more relatable than just going to be a CEO. What is it? What's that process look like? Putting it together. What are some of the things that have to be in there? What are some things that you put in there that you're allowed to talk about? I think I'm really curious of how all that goes.
Sure, sure. By the way, to your point, the format is almost always the same. So I think this is useful for anything. And think about to your point, not just for entering a CEO job. Think about it trying to win a C-suite job. Think about having got the job, how you would write your game plan or
Yeah.
business plan or your thesis. So first of all, I always believe in what I call whiteboard plans. Whiteboard plans are like a plan on a page. What's the starting thesis? By when? So if you look at an organization or a group you're, going to inherit, and you're thinking okay, first of all, identify the destination. So at Xero, it's a public company. So I could say, okay, this is its current market cap. If I wanted to unlock shareholder value, which is the ultimate goal as a CEO, right? Or unlock customer value, my destination within some time frame, give yourself 2 years, 3 years, just write a vision statement of what could success look like, right? And now you think about that as as the goal in the deck, the goal for the deck, and then you work backwards, right? So first of all, you need a goal, and you can identify an outside in goal, or you can ask the person you're interviewing with, what does success look like? Do you see any goal set in a time frame? And then I think the decks all look the same, quite
Real quick,
frankly.
for you, was that a number, a revenue target? What was that for you for this
Yeah.
one?
So for me as a CEO in that deck, I would be saying, hey, this is the current shareholder. So maybe this leads to kind of what I'm about to tell you on the journey on the way. So think about
Great.
the goal for a public company CEO, it's about unlocking customer value. Because I believe if you don't have customer love, just chasing shareholder value is not. So for me, the three constituents that I'm trying to kind of improve are my customers, my investors, and my employees. So think about the destination as having like those three constituents, right? And again, I know I'm talking in CEO speak, but like, for somebody who's crafting an internal vision, it might be this is my vision for my business in the context of the overall business, and maybe for my team, or maybe for my customers. But I think you always need a customer view. You always need like, what does it mean to the business? What is financial success for the business? In our case, it's also measured by shareholders. And then you definitely need like for your team, what does success look like? Presuming these are the three constituents, and
Are
you
those
lead,
equal? Those three equal?
you're all in service of the customer. So to me, the customer first, investors and
Well, some would say, take care of your employees and they will take care of your customers. So the employees are first. And then because of that, now that could be just a nice thing to say, but
I think
you're actually in the seat doing the real job. You're a current operator, not a former operator. You're a
yeah,
current operator. So I'm curious from you, is that just kind of nice CEO speak that I put in the book after I retire? Or is there a chance that, hey, take care of your employees, they will take care of your customer? What do you think about that?
well, let me tell you how we're talking about it at Zero. First of all, it's a virtuous cycle. Like it's a
Okay.
virtuous, but if you think about a virtuous cycle and you said to me, what would I put at the top of the diagram of the circle? It would start with the customer.
Okay.
Okay. You say it starts with the customer. If we do right by the customer, if you think of virtuous cycle, you probably have two other circles on that like cyclical picture. And you'd say, okay, bottom, if this is too much detail, let me know. But if you went to the bottom left, you might be like, okay, to take care of our customers, our investors will be happy, right? And then you have on the other side, like if we take care of our employees, we take care of the customer. So I do think it's a virtuous cycle. And what we talk about at Zero is a high performance, high purpose, high people culture. We say all three. We say performance, people, purpose. So now look at those three words aligned to the circle I just gave you. Purpose, we're here to make small businesses, more successful. That is our purpose. That is the North Star. Okay. It's the North, make no mistake. And then we say we want a high performance culture, right? Because that is both great for our customers, but it's also great for our people. It's how do you come to Zero and do the best work of your life? And we say a high people culture because we do care about our people. We are known for being, I would say, a culture that where employees, like we don't really have assholes at Zero. We don't. Somehow we do this remarkable job of lovely people who come together, who kind of want to do the right thing. I don't know how we do it, Ryan, but we've done it for 20 years. And my job as CEO is just not to mess it up. Like it's a remarkable culture. Every time people come in, they're like, wow, your people are so nice. Our customers say your people are so nice. Like your brand is like really nice. So again, all I can tell you is I'm trying not to mess that up. So we correlate those three boxes I gave you. We say we're going to be high purpose, high performance, high people. And we said, like, sorry, guys, you don't get to choose. It's an and. It's not an or, it's an and. And at the top is our purpose. So that means the customer, we all serve the customer. We all serve the customer. So that's the way we talk about Zero. So anyway, back to the whiteboard plan. Hopefully, like I know we digressed. So if you take the thesis that there's a goal you want to get to, you have to be able to say like success could look like this. And I know some people on this call are going to be like, well, I don't know what the goal is. Okay, we'll start the other way, which is every deck begins with the outside in opportunity. Every single one. So to your point, like how would you script a deck if you were building it for yourself? Always outside in first. First of all, what's the market context? Is this a growing market, shrinking market? Are you participating in tailwinds or not? Remember I said this like where to play choice was my number one choice as a CEO. I think when you're running a business, start with the outside in. What's going on? Then I always have a SWAT. I do like, hey, what is our current hand? How are we doing against the opportunity? And it's always a SWOT. It always has four quarters. It's very classic. Like I write bullet points in each. This deck had it. I said, here's Zero's current. Right. By the
Can
way,
you
in
go
my
through a SWOT real quick? I remember this from earning my MBA, but haven't really talked about it much since then. So can you just walk quickly like through
SWOT
what a
is your
SWOT is?
strengths. Like
Yep.
cut 4 or 5 bullet points on the company's strengths.
Strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and
Weaknesses,
threats. So
opportunities. That's it. It's just literally one page and you put 4 or 5 bullets in each box. Just stream of consciousness. By
yep.
the way, in the outside in landscape, you also have to do the competitive landscape. So you can't just do the market. You have to do the competitors.
So
But
part
then,
of what you're doing is you are showing them, one, I've thought about this. Like,
mhm,
two, I understand what I'm getting myself into. I have an acute understanding of the market, of the situation, of the competitive landscape. I
you
understand
got
our strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats. So you're in a way, you're kind of exhibiting, you're making the board probably be like, okay, she's got this. I can go back to doing whatever else I was doing
yeah,
because Sukhinder's
exactly.
got this.
They want
Right.
to know that you see the of any leader, by the way, and this is my core thesis. You have to be outside in and inside out. They want to know that and you want to know, like, have you seen the picture? Can you see the movie before you think about the game plan? So can you see the forest? Okay, so that's your forest view. Then you have your SWAT. Okay, and then of course, like they want the critical thinking, like, okay, if you saw this SWAT against the opportunity, what are the 4 or 5 moves you would make? And by the way, remember, if you're public, you have a company's financials, or if you're private, you have your own financials, right? Now, this is where you ask, like, what's the goal line? Remember, I said there's a vision. I typically put the vision on the first page. So I start with the ambition. Like every deck is like, here's where I'm trying to go. My thesis is we can be a blank organization by blank. Okay. Then I zoom out, I do market context, then I do competitive context, then I do a SWOT. Then I have one slide that's like my 5 moves. And believe it or not, I'm like, okay, if I do these 5 moves right, like this is my thesis. And then that's like the what I'm going to do. There might be one slide on like, hey, here's the how, because I have to work with people. I have to work with investors. So there might be like, hey, in trying to make these 5 moves, here's like 2 or 3 things to consider. And then believe it or not, I estimate the end outcome. And that's it. It's like a 6 page deck. I think I remember doing for the board, I have to go back and check. I might have had 6 slides up front. And I was like, that's the sizzle, guys. And then I had the details. And then I had like 5 more slides. So like the TLDR should be like in 5 or 6 slides, can you paint a picture of like where you want to go, what you considered, what you think the company's current position is, what are the 5 or 6 moves you think are most essential, and what could the yield be? And by the way, you can put a range on the yield. You can put a probability. You can say, hey, these are the 3 safe moves I'd make. This is 2 more meaty moves. And here's one flyer. Like you can even probability assess them. What do you think the person's looking for? When you go in to pitch for a job or have the job, I think most people presume that the person on the other end is looking for the answer. They're looking for the quality of your thinking. They're
Mm.
looking to see like you could paint a range of probabilities and you have, they're looking for your ability to assess, solution, pivot. So that's why you can put out, hey, here's 5 ideas. By the way, I'm going to give you like my probability on whether these will work or not. A couple here are really safe. A couple here are like flyers. A couple here are probably going to work, but they require significant investment. They're looking to see that your thinking can encompass all those things, right?
Yeah.
And then mostly they want to know that if like if you're wrong, what would you do? They're going to ask you that question. You're like, well, if I'm wrong, I'll pivot. So,
Yeah.
so I know this was a very
What,
long-winded
what,
answer
no,
to
no,
your
it's great.
question.
What you didn't mention there in that deck is like you as a person, your personal purpose, your core values, your behaviors that make those values true. Is that covered in previous interviews? And
You hit
so
it.
you don't need to cover that anymore,
You
or
hit it. Yeah,
what's
you
that?
hit it. By the
Okay.
time, the only reason I didn't cover it in a deck is because I wouldn't have even gotten to the final
If you didn't
round.
have all that, that's
Yeah,
table
and
stakes
by
to
the way,
make
that's
sure.
what I'm spending all the personal time on. Like, so it's interesting because it's zero now a couple of times. We don't do it consistently, but it's something we should consider. A couple times more recently now, as we're in the final rounds with leaders, we give them a problem to solve and they build us a deck. It is remarkable how much, because what happens, as you know, in early interviews, is you're chatting to somebody and you're talking and you get to feel who they are. You might get to feel like, to your point, how do they respond to the soft questions? You know, and some people, consulting companies do these like classic case interviews, as you know, which are hard because you're asking people to think on their feet, and some people are good at that, some are not. But if you give a person a business problem and say, hey, you know what, for the final round, like, here's a situation we're really facing. We'd love you to just like, write a couple slides and come back and tell us how you walk it through. You see the clarity of a leader's thinking, their solutioning, their problem solving, how they work their way around a business problem. That is a what, right? That's not a who, that's a what. And so, yes, I think by the end they're testing the what. Now, of course, you know this, right? In all leadership hires, like the most important thing is not just front channel of like me chatting with you about how lovely I am and how lovely I think I'm. It's all the back channel. So to be clear, I'm pretty sure the whole way through my interview, somebody is back channeling what all the people have to say in the valley about me who've worked with me, the lovers, the naysayers, the people who think
Wait, by
intense.
back channeling, you mean references and people who
Yes,
know
I
you
mean
that have worked?
references. So like
Yeah.
I think a good process for any leader, including when I hire, I'm back channeling all the way through because you kind of hit the other important point. There's like the what of how you think. I think you hit the most one of the very important ones, the who of who you are, the why of why your values and your strengths, are what this organization needs. Like these are the questions that any person is assessing who's hiring a leader. Like the what? Can they do the job? Can they think about the next job? How would they think their way around a problem? How would they, what's their vision? The who? Who are they? Like how their values fit ours? What are their superpowers? And the why? Like why is this person going to be the right fit for the job at hand? I like back channels all the way through because it tells you a lot about the who. You can even ask the person their why. You can assess your own why you would hire them, but you can always ask the person their why. Like the zero would ask me my why, like why zero? I listed the four things I talked about, and I listed one, which was pretty freaking important to me. I was like, I want to go where my values fit and my strengths are valued. This is what I
Yeah.
say now. I'm going to go where my values fit and my strengths are valued. So, do my superpowers align to what the organization needs? I'm doing that fit, but you should also do that fit because I'm not perfect and there's things you're not going to, maybe if you wish for a leader of another's ilk, like you should know that going in. And then number two, do we share enough values in common that like when the times get tough, like we want to be in the boat with each other. Those are the only things I care about. Do you see my strengths as something that is additive to this organization? Do I see them the same way or accelerants? And number two, do we share enough values? And so I said that to Zero. I said, like, the reason I'm here is like, man, I look around, this place is full of lovely people. They want to do the right thing. They're diverse, they're humble, they're inclusive. Man, I would want to be a part of this tribe. By the way, the board is diverse. Like, yes. And I know maybe diversity is a bad word. I'm sorry. I'm a woman of color who's a leader. I want to go to a place that welcomes like who I am, how I show up, and have heterogeneity, diversity of opinions in the room. So, yeah, do I look for that when I interview? For sure.
I would love to go a little bit deeper on when you're making hiring decisions for senior leaders to work for you, because one of the commonalities I've found, Sukhinder, and excellent long-term CEOs are that they're really, really good about surrounding themselves with excellent people, high character, high competence. So you mentioned back channeling. So you're doing reference checks. You're checking on the people. That's one of the things, right? What are some of the other things you do? Take me inside the process. What is it like when you have an opening on your team, a direct report of yours? How does it work? What are some of the must-haves? Like they got to have this to make it. What's that process like?
Sure. And I interview anybody who's in our top kind of 2 to 3 leadership cohorts. So I care a lot that, I don't just interview people who are in mine. Now, I don't have the hiring decision on some of those, but I do interview kind of the top 2 to 3 levels of Xero because it's very important to me that our leaders all exhibit, the values and the traits that will make them successful at Xero.
If it how common, I want to get to that in a second, but how common is it that you have disagreements? Let's say it's 2 or 3 levels below you and you're interviewing them and you're like, oh my God, they're amazing. And someone else is like, I don't know. Or probably more common. No, I don't think they got it. And the other person says yes. Does that happen like a good amount?
It doesn't happen as much as you think, and I'll tell you why. Because you always have a diverse slate of interviewers,
Yeah.
and you always want to have bar raisers in your interviewers. So interestingly, I'd say it's Xero. In most of where I've been, if you have a high quality team and you have enough diversity on the interviewing panel, the right issues usually show up and it ends up being a close call. I'd say the clear outliers are there. And then the controversy, to your point, I'll tell you where the controversy always is. It's always about maybe somebody's strengths and that they're superpowers, and then the shadow of that, and does that fit culturally? It's almost never about competence at that point. Now, look, it could be about somebody's potential. Have they done this job yet? So you're betting on their potential versus like, I don't know, known experience. That's another dimension that people sometimes debate. Well, this person has all the experience and this person has all the potential. That sometimes shows up in the end interview rounds. But with the close calls are always like about culture fit. They're like, wow, this person is excellent at this. Are they going to be able to get it done here? It's not about, are they a great person or are they competent? It's almost always about culture when you get to these close calls. But they're always, I would say the issues always surface when you have a diverse slate of interviewers, which I mean, it comes back to why I like diversity of perspective. So, what does the interview process look like
Yeah.
for me? I'll tell you, my process is very specific and probably very funny to people. I always say sell, interview, sell. So, when I meet with a candidate for the first time, I'm spending all my time selling the opportunity. People are like, what? Talented people have choice. Like, I am in full sell mode on my Zero is a nation consider. I can't tell you how many times we've approached a leader who's like, I'm not looking. I'm really happy where I am. And like, I go into sell mode hard. Almost anybody, and quite frankly, that's my most charming self as versus my most, aggressive, intense, irritating self. So like, man, I got a bait and switch. But I hope not. And then the second interview, and then typically before I see them again, believe it or not, I put them through my whole leadership team. So I'm like, I'm going to see you again, but first I want you to meet a bunch of my team. So why do I let them meet a bunch of my team? Obviously, in my cell interview, I am getting to know who they are. Like, but my point is, it's like, then tell me a bit about yourself. And I'm going to tell you a lot about Zero. So that first interview is probably 50-50 me telling, them, letting them ask a bunch of questions and me kind of ask about who they are. But it's not like, what do you think about Zero, blah, 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 because they're not even sure they want to come. And so in that, I'm doing a silent assessment of like, oh, would I want to work with this person? And then hopefully after that first call, they're like, you know what, Sukhinder, I would like to learn more. And then I'm like, great, now go meet 5 of my team members. Why do I do that? Because it makes it more efficient for me when I interview. You know why? They're going to go ask a bunch more questions. They're going to learn about the organization. They're going to be a bunch more informed. So by the time they see me again, now we're in interview time. Now I'm like, okay, like you leaned into the process. You met each of my leadership team. You got to ask a bunch of questions. Now I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. And then we get into the heart of it. And then I might meet with somebody 1, 2 times. I might have them, obviously, if they direct report to me, they probably meet our board, a couple members, not all, but I probably have a couple board members interview. Meanwhile, of course, after my first interview, we're calibrating, we're shortlisting, and then and then I probably see them again. The board sees them, not the whole board, a couple people from the board, depending on the role. And maybe I have a couple more of my close-in leaders. If it's a close call, spend more time with them. That's what it looks like. And then we make a call.
So when we talked about your book, you mentioned that you give this advice like you don't have to be specifically qualified for a specific job before taking it.
Mhm.
So do you still believe that? And if so, this job you were overqualified for, I think, right?
Yeah.
But you still want to give this advice to others.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this idea of still going for jobs that maybe you aren't even specifically qualified for?
Well, I think it comes to the quality of your thinking. So,
Yeah.
will I take somebody who's not specifically qualified for a job? Well, look, there are a couple of things, and you can appreciate this. While you might not be specifically qualified for this job, you need to be qualified for whatever the company is headed to. Okay. So let's say, Zero is now a, 2 billion plus kind of revenue organization. Let's say, and we've just told, our investors we're going to double by 2028. So like our fiscal 28. So we've already given, we just said that with our recent acquisition. So if I'm thinking about the organization doubling, you know, like you would say, okay, well, there are some must-haves and some options at the MI level. So must-haves are like, can you operate at the next level of scale? Okay, if you haven't done it in this industry or this job, can you demonstrate to me where have you seen the level of scale or complexity we're going to? Like as an example. So I'd say in almost every job, Ryan, there's some must-have skills and they're right. And the question is you have to show that if you're not in this job, you have demonstrated the capacity for those skills. So, if you ask me, would I take somebody, I don't know, I'm making it up, we don't have this job before, who hasn't been a COO into the COO job? Sure, but I want to know that the summation of the skills that I need in that job, they have demonstrated individually. So I think like you want to know that you're hiring a person who can go where the puck is going, right? In hockey analogies, without having to have done the specific job. Where do you typically find that? You find that in people who are agile in their ability to learn, to grow, to adapt. And then, as I said, look, in the case of any company, including Xero, there are some must-haves. Is it likely, as an example, that at our scale, we would hire a chief revenue officer who has never managed revenue? I would say that would be a very high risk hire for us. you know,
Mhm.
but if you said to me, hey, again, would I take a COO who's never been in the COO role but has managed discrete multiple functions over time at significant complexity, who is now going to put it all together in this job? I would say yes. So those are maybe like real and theoretical examples. And yes, I believe multiple times in my career, earlier in particular. The problem is once you've had 20 or 30 years, maybe 30 years of experience, Ryan, you are qualified, sadly, for almost everything because you're just old. So
Yeah.
now, now I'm old, so there. Sadly, most of the people I interview are younger than me. So sadly, I am going to be overqualified for a lot of things now. That
Well,
wasn't always true.
you mentioned the fact that you're now a $2.1 billion company, 21% year over year growth. So you're just absolutely crushing it. I am curious about this balance between growth, and we're getting into real operator stuff here,
Yeah.
growth and profitability, as well as this obsession, this kind of Amazon-ish obsession for the customer that you've hit on a few times. How do you balance? I don't know if they're competing priorities, but how do you balance out growth, profitability, as well as customer happiness?
Yeah, well, you hit, I think and obviously this is now very specific when you're a public company CEO versus private, because when you're
Yeah.
private, you might have more latitude.
Yeah.
When you're public, kind of hit the nail on the head. Unfortunately, it's not an or, it's an and.
Yeah.
I'd say in tech in particular, there was an era of growth at all costs, as you know, and then we moved to growth and efficiency. And I think, and if you look at today at multiples in public tech and in SaaS, the category we play in, if you are high growth and profitable, you traded a bigger multiple, right? So investors obviously benefit from that, and investors like that because to get both is hard. It's hard. To your point, it's hard. So now let's go to the fact that it's hard. It's an and, not an or, if you want to be a high performing SaaS company over time. And AI, of course, is only going to accelerate the expectations of how efficient you are, by the way, right? So that benchmark is not going down, it's going up. Okay, so it's hard. So how do you do it internally? First of all, like very early on, I said to Zeros, like it's an and, it's not an or. Welcome. We are going from being a teenager to like university. Like welcome to the graduating class. Like great that you're on the top of this stack. Now you're headed to be a freshman again in the next, in the next class at university. And guess what? Like it resets, and so now it's growth and profitability. I think they understand that. I think the way you manage it internally is I think you do have a number of bets. I think you do have all things being equal. I'm a believer in bets. So, at Xero, we do have a portfolio of things we are doing, and they run the gamut to things that are trying to improve productivity, to things that are trying to, like, I'd say multiple bites at the growth apple and it making customers happy. And so I think if you have a good CFO and if you have a supportive board, we luckily do, they allow us to manage a portfolio of bets, and we give, I would say, ourselves latitude with investors. We've been clear with investors, hey, we're going to try and be balanced, but all things being equal, we're not going to give you, I don't know, what we call like rule of 40 for us has been an aspiration, not guidance. And people say, well, why is it an aspiration, not formal guidance? And we're like, well, because at the end of the day, we want the room within these two sectors to flex between growth and profitability. So we're going to promise you both, but the level of both we want to flex between where we see opportunity. And again, the best you can do with investors, I think, is if you have supportive investors, we are lucky that we do, is to be able to say, this is what we're doing internally. Let us give you examples of decisions we might make. Trust us to be thoughtful allocators of capital and to be optimizing between, but we're not going to give you a specific number on each because that takes away our flexibility to make the right decisions for Xero. Now, again, I realize I'm giving you an ideal case, right? Sometimes as CEO, you don't have that latitude. Let's say you're doing a turnaround or what have you. Internally, though, I think you need to manage a portfolio. Of course, you need, I'd say, your own constructs, and you need buffer in both. I believe that if you're going to get to the right outcomes, you need to be, I'd say, shooting past your target on both profitability and growth. And it's a balance. It's not easy. It's all about being what we call an allocator of capital. And what does that mean? That really means like you have to have you have a set of focused bets. You have to say to everybody, these are the bets we're focused on. These are the ones we're not. I'm sorry, we can't afford to do everything. And a portfolio of focused bets.
What are some examples of bets you've actually made? Would it be the recent acquisition be a bet? What are some examples of bets?
Yeah, of bets we've made. Well, first
Yeah.
of all, I mean, as we talked about, remember we talked about building that ideal business plan, and we said bets can be smaller moves, they can be bigger moves. So obviously, we just announced the acquisition of Melio, which is a leading bill pay player in the U.S. That would be called the biggest of big moves. Like you don't make that move every year. It is. We're super proud of it, but it was many, many months, almost a year in the works. but in organically, like let's not talk about M&A, or we can talk about smaller M&A because, Melio is an outlier in terms of its size. Bets are very simple. If you read our Investor Day presentation, we're like, here's some of our bets. We are going to now use pricing and packaging to try and deliver more value to customers each year. That's a bet. We listed out, like literally, we had 5 themes. We had about 3 bets under each. We said, these are the bets we're making. Number 2, we're going to try and transform our sales motions so they don't just focus on acquiring a subscriber, but helping subscribers pick the right product on the way in and improve our mix. By the way, do these bets sound quite operational? Sure. That's what I mean about a fundamental bet. I'm like, here's some smaller moves we're making. But when you compound these moves, we see that we can unlock a lot more value in a Xero subscriber, not just keep adding subscribers without increasing the amount of products they take from us. So you're changing your sales motions, you're changing your pricing and packaging. These are literally discrete bets we listed in our investor presentation. We had another one. We said, hey, we're going to reimagine the small business experience. I don't know if you know that, Ryan, but this past week, Xero just launched a reimagined dashboard for small businesses. You should go check it out. It was designed with 3,000 customers. We said a year and a half ago, we're going to do that. We just shipped it. Now, by the way, that's for customer happiness. We're not betting on it having financial yield, but man, our customers want an easier to use dashboard with customizable widgets that they can control, that gives them more insight. And so that was a bet. So remember we talked about customer happiness, financial performance, people. Imagine if I sent you our investor presentation page of like 5 themes and 15 bets, you would see there are bets allocated to each of those things that are meant to drive each of those things. Some are for customer happiness, some are for financial revenue accretion, some are for productivity, some are for future growth. So that's what bets look like. And again, and on a page, you ought to be able to write down like that. And I think most zeros would say they could understand our bets.
Let's talk about the people side of things and specifically culture. This is hard to get it right, but vital and super important. What's your overall mindset and philosophy on building? I mean, you're in charge, you're the CEO, on building an excellent culture at Xero.
I think culture means consistency of message and what's important. So I think, people say, oh, culture is what you do, not what you say, or how people act when no one's looking. I told you, like, there's some important, first of all, my first goal is to not, excuse me, screw up. I think I swore before, not to really like screw up the thing that Xero does uniquely right, which is it attracts really, I don't know how else to say it, it attracts really wonderful people. That's all I can say. And for me, wonderful people, like I say, they show up, they want to do the right thing, they care, they collaborate well, their natural inclination is to be helpful, and they're really unentitled. Like those speak to my personal values, the type of people I would want around me. By the way, I also want people who are very diverse from my style and perspective. And so, like I said, I love that Xero attracts all different kinds of people from all different kinds of backgrounds for that reason. Okay, so that's one. So let's try not to screw up the thing the company does well. But I think in terms of the culture and how you kind of drive it, I think I really strive, as I said, to be consistent and authentic in my communications about what's important, to be pretty plain speaking on the things we're going to do and the things we're not going to do, right? And to make sure that what we say to investors, what we say to the board, and what we say to employees all matches up again and again and again. So for me, culture is about consistency. And maybe that is like a weird answer, but that's how I strive to, I would say, improve our culture. Of course, we did things like look at our values and we re-energized our values about a year and a half ago when we did our investor strategy, the thing I talked about, our portfolio of bets, we made them public. We sort of said, hey, for the next era, what do our values need to be? How do we take them? How do we tweak them? How do we improve on them? Yes, but you don't change your values every year. Mostly you try and live your values. And the best way I know how to live my values is to be consistent as a leader in my messaging, in doing what I say I'm going to do, and keep closing the loop for our employees. We talked about it. We press on all 3: purpose, performance, people. We try and, like I'd say, manage all 3 in concert. And I try and move them as a system. And honestly, I just keep, believe it or not, in culture, I just keep trying to repeat the same thing again and again and again.
It was funny. I love that you said this. What in all relationships in life, I think one of the key components to trust, which is the foundation of a relationship, and it's mandatory that you have it if you're going to have a relationship with somebody, is being consistent, is doing what you say you're going to do, day after day after day, right? It's continuing to show up, continuing to do the thing, continuing to do the work, to being dependable, to being reliable, to consistently being there. All these unsexy words. It's funny, but man, it leads to trust. It leads to the formation of a strong and powerful relationship. So it's interesting that this consistency of messaging is so important to you. It makes a lot of sense that you've been able to build excellent cultures wherever you go because you're so focused on being consistent.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said there's one other word that goes with trust, which is authenticity, right? So
Yeah.
like I believe like just say the thing. Say the
Yeah.
thing, say. You earn people's trust when you do it. And quite frankly, and by the way, there are times you make unpopular decisions for culture. Let's not forget that. This does not mean that things don't change. This, in fact, quite the opposite. This is the challenge. This is the challenge in building a culture in today's tech that's enduring. Things change all the time. You have to pivot. You have COVID, you have AI, you have efficiency. When I arrived at Xero, we laid off almost 900 people 6 weeks after I arrived. Do you think that's a popular decision or an easy
Whoa,
decision?
what happened? Why?
I based, remember that plan we talked about with the board? I said
Was
we're going
that in
to
the plan? Like, I'm going to chop off 900 people?
What was in the plan was not I'm going to chop off 900 people. What I was in the plan. Remember that outside in view? I said,
Yeah.
here's where Xero does well. Here's where Xero benchmarks less well. So I was just very clear. My outside in analysis of the company is it's amazing here. Now, keep in mind, again, you don't make a decision like that lightly. I arrived, and by the way, this is all public knowledge. There's nothing here I'm not saying that employees haven't heard. When I arrived, I think I said to the board and I said to the current CEO, because we had an overlap period, I'm like, I'm going to bring in McKinsey and I'm going to benchmark Xero because I'm pretty sure we're overly large. But I don't think this isn't the kind of decision you just say, well, this is my thesis. Think about the impact to employees, right? So we bought a McKinsey. We did a 6 week go round and I took over the CEO seat officially on my birthday, which was like February 1st. And the very first all hands employee said to me, are you going to do layoffs? And in my very first all hands, I had SaaS benchmarks in my deck. And I said, look, I'm not going to talk to you about whether we're going to do layoffs or not, but I'm going to show you an outside in view of where Xero does well and where Xero doesn't do well.
Mm.
Put it out there. I talked about how excited I was. Maybe it was my first or second, but my point was within my first two all hands. It was either the day I did it or 2 weeks later. And a month later, we did a layoff. And it was brutal. But again, coming back to consistency, I thought, like, my God, if this is my thesis, and the world was heading there. This was an era by, like, I mean, there was more, like, it was an untold number of layoffs in the beginning of 2022 and through 2023. But I was like, wow, can I really stand up in front of this team that I am about to be the CEO of? And people are like, are there going to be layoffs? And I am doing a McKinsey study in the background.
Mm.
What is the data I can give these folks that gives them a clue to how I'm thinking about the business that's still authentic, right? So my point is like authenticity serves you through change. So consistency is about consistency of like what are your North Stars? What are the things that principles you're trying to uphold? How are you making decisions? Consistency does not mean nothing changes. Quite frankly, as I said, this is the hardest thing in culture. We are in an era where everything is changing and you're trying to bring your employees along. But like, you got to go. Like, are you not going to go on AI? If the whole market is valuing efficiency, can we afford not to make the decision to, like, if we're unprofitable, to cut our headcount? No. So the question is, how do you maintain culture and how do you maintain care for employees in a world where everything is changing? Quite frankly, that is a seminal question. And the only thing I know how to lean on is like the why, be consistent on the why, be consistent on your messaging. What are you aiming towards? And I'd say be transparent,
Yep.
within the bounds of what you can do and authentic in your messaging. I mean, that's it. Like that's so I think it is really hard to just, say nothing changes. That's actually the problem. I think people are like, well, in a great culture, nothing changes. I said, no, unfortunately, in a great culture, you have to adapt to what's changing. You
Yep.
know, that is
It,
that
it's
challenge.
easy to criticize a CEO who has to lay people off when you're not the CEO because we don't see it all. We don't know what's going on. We don't understand the profitability numbers. It's so easy to criticize that person, but that's why it's not for everybody. And you got to be tough and you got to be willing to do what it takes to keep the company in business first and foremost and set the company up to succeed in the future. And that's why that job isn't for everybody. And you got to be willing to make those tough calls. And I admire that. I think that would be so hard to do. And usually, though, anything worthwhile in your life that you've ever done is preceded by something really, really hard.
Yeah, and
Whether
it's
it's,
hard throughout. I mean, like quite frankly, it's hard
say that
throughout.
again, it's in what?
It's hard throughout. It's not
Yeah.
just preceded by something hard. It's hard throughout, right? But let
Yeah.
me give you the hope I have. And again, I'm going to come back to the quality of the Xero team that I inherited and the people I get to work with every day. Like we have something called a global all hands, right? Like it's our monthly all hands, and we do it live, and I play a pretty big part in it. But you know what? In those all hands, like employees sometimes ask me tough questions, and occasionally I'm like, hey, this is not appropriate. But by and large, in those all hands, I get to say to employees, I get to talk to employees about the system view. Remember we talked about that, Ryan, the system view? You're right. As a CEO, you do see the system. And often you get criticized because everybody doesn't see the system. But if your employees are smart, and they usually are, and you're willing to have an authentic conversation with them, you can give them a system view and they are grateful for it. Like every time I have a conversation with Zeros and I'm like, hey, I'm going to zoom back and show you a piece of the picture I'm seeing. So again, just a simple example. I know we're going to wrap up soon. We just did this big acquisition of this company called Melio. And as you can imagine, I mean, my God, for 8 months, you have a bunch of people in secret working on a deal, and then we launch it last week. And in our first GH afterwards, I had a whole script and I went off script because we had a GAH, and instead of presenting the same slides we presented to investors, we're like, let us tell you what investors asked us about. Let us zoom back and give you a view of what investors were asking us about. And people are grateful. They're, well, wow, thanks for bringing us in the room and and when you can be placed, and I always start those GAHs, and look, I'm going to knock on wood because I could be proven wrong, but I start those GAHs. I said, I'm going to share a view with you that, of course, is confidential. Like, we don't, this is stuff like I'm never going to write in a book, I'm never going to talk about on a podcast, but let me give you a feel for what it's like. That has never served me wrong with employees, not at Xero, not elsewhere. If you're willing to be authentic and you can give them a system view. Now, you can't give them everything, to your point. Like there are things that are confidential, what have you. But the more you can help, your team see the forest and give them a view of the forest, they're smart people. You think they're not thinking about these things? Of course they are. So, I mean, I would just say as a CEO, if you can be willing to answer tough questions or zoom back and give your teams the occasional systems view, I think it will come back to serve you really well on the why when change happens.
Yes. I want to close by talking about making a big ask. Okay. You did this earlier in your career to Eric Schmidt at Google, which I think is super inspiring. You're pregnant and you want to keep running an international business at Google, but you told him, like, I need to pay for me and my nanny to travel the world business class. And I would imagine, knowing you backed it up with great reasoning and a deck, probably, and a presentation. But I think it's inspiring to hear of people who make a big, risky ask. And there's a lot that goes into it, so you don't come across as some entitled person who feels like they deserve the world when you haven't fully earned it. So can you go into that story and how it could be helpful for maybe somebody else who's scared, even though they have earned the right to make that ask, and what
Yeah.
you would say to them?
Sure. Well, first of all, just for complete accuracy, I made that ask to Omid Kordestani, who was my boss and Google's chief business officer, who I think shared it with Eric.
Okay.
And definitely aware. And I was in at least one business trip to Korea where Eric actually kindly offered to take me and my daughter and my nanny with him on his travel. So he certainly was aware and very supportive. And am eternally grateful, actually, to Google for their support of my family situation in that time. How do you make a risky ask? Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. First of all, don't be entitled. You don't deserve it. Well, I take it back. You might deserve it, but don't go in like you deserve it. Go in and understand. Just be like, hey, I know this is a big ask. Now, to your point, I think in any risky ask, you have to first say, how does it serve the person you're asking and the organization you're asking? So why did Google say yes? I think they said yes because they're like, wow, the cost of losing Sukhinder in this job and replacing her with someone else and the cost of that time versus the cost of helping support her 6-month-old at the time baby traveling with her as she moves around the world to every 180 different countries I was managing. So first of all, I think you have to say, what's the benefit to you? Like, what's the upside? And then I think I mean, I think in any risky ask, you also have to outline the downsides and how you would mitigate those risks. So I think if you want to be a very thoughtful asker on a big risk, by the way, remember, we just went through the board with a big acquisition. Do you think we didn't go through, like, here's a big, we want you to support this acquisition, here's why. You have to be, I would say, and I think I write about this in my book, you have to list, the downsides as much as the upside. So first of all, go in and say, why is it beneficial to you? Number two, what are the downsides of this risk to you? How would I mitigate them? So somebody might say, well, gosh, the downside is, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, well, here's how I thought about that downside and how I'd mitigate it. So on balance, that you've considered it all, and that and I'd say in most risky moves, is there a way back? So often there is. Like you can say, look, if this doesn't work out, here's something we can consider, but let's try it. So I think in very risky moves, like in the case of the Google one, there's a way out. If it's a personal question, there's a way out. So I think you have to paint the upside for them. You have to be really clear on the risks and the mitigants. That shows you've been thoughtful. And I think I would end with the ask again from a tone of gratitude and realizing they don't have to do it, but you would appreciate if they do it. And inside of that, yes, of course you can talk about your value, of course. But if you make it all about you, yeah, I'm not sure that's the right point. The point is it's about them, and your value in that equation.
That's the key point. Whether you're going for a job
Yeah.
or you're going for a big ask, if you're going for a job, you're essentially solving someone else's problem, and you need to talk with them about how you're going to solve their problems and make their life better, to make it as simplistic as possible. And I think when people mess this up, they focus on themselves and why maybe they're awesome, or they deserve the raise, or they deserve the job, or they deserve the business class ticket, as opposed to saying, this is how it solves your problem. Be others oriented, others focused, not look at me, I've earned this, I'm entitled. It's no, this is how it's going to help you.
Yeah, and of course, look, I am, of course, a fan of if people want to advocate for promotion or raise, or I would never say don't advocate. I would say when you advocate, think about, what you have
Yes.
done, what you still can do, and, and how you've demonstrated impact in the past and how you're going to demonstrate impact in the future. Like if I was going to go ask for a raise or ask, I'd be like, look, I'm so excited to be here. This is what I've accomplished. Yeah, this is, I think, what people would say about my work. I think I'm already operating at this level, but you judge, you let me know. Like I also would love the feedback. Okay, there's an ask. I'd love the and what I'm so excited to do if you were going to give me the permission, is like I can't wait to unlock more value here. Here's some of the things I think I could still accomplish. Like, again, it's about the tone of the ask and your recognition that you are part of a system. To your point, it's not you in your own system. You are part of a system
Yeah.
and paint the vision of you in the system and how it's better for the system and for you.
One more. You're meeting with someone who's earlier in their career. Maybe they're early 20s, just graduated college, maybe business school, and they want to leave a positive dent in the world, but they're not fully sure how. What are some
Yeah.
general pieces of life/career advice for that person?
I always say, do early on, if you don't know how to leave a dent in the world, I'd be like, do great work for great people. So what I like, so sometimes you don't know where you want to go. You don't know what industry, right? So you might say, oh, this company is interesting or this person's interesting. I'd be like, go find a way to, I'd say, apprentice under somebody super talented. Now, talented doesn't mean easy. It doesn't, you know what? It doesn't mean like they're like the world's nicest boss. But I would say if you end up doing great work for great people, you're going to be fine. And if in that equation, you don't even know what great work looks like, go find a great person in a category you find generally interesting and apprentice. And by the way, and when I say great work for that person means like work your tail off. Work your tail off. If you work your tail off for somebody who's highly talented, you're going to learn disproportionately more. That's it. That's
Yeah.
it.
Get after it and be a value added person to the team, right? Be at how I think the question you get asked at the end of each day is, what did I do to add value to my boss today? What did I do to add value to the person I'm apprenticing under today? And write those things down and think about it, have conversations about it, like strive for that. I think that is crucial and really
That's
good
great.
advice.
And look, and by the way, if you, let's say you're doing great work for somebody that you don't respect or whatever, maximize the learning opportunity. And in your
Yes.
next move, say, man, you know what? This is what I was capable of here. I maximized the opportunity. I got a great reference. Again, pretty much early in your career, right? And then be like, now I'm going to go find somebody great to work for. And great is usually defined by pattern of success, maybe outsized capability in one area or another, known for either like the people who've like worked with that person go on to do great things. So you can see outside in markers of someone's success. Again, it doesn't mean they're easy to work for. If your goal is to find accelerated impact in learning, it usually is around people who've done the same.
Love it. Sukhinder, this is amazing. I am so glad you came back. Let's keep checking in. I don't know. Let's make it more frequent because you're like right in the seat doing the thing. It's really, really hard and you're killing it. And I love talking to current operators who are getting after it, making a difference, building great cultures, building great value for not only your employees, but your customers and shareholders. It's awesome to talk to you. I'd love to continue this dialogue as we both progress.
For sure. And of course, I couldn't end this call without saying thank you for being a Xero customer.
Of course. Thanks so
And it
much.
doesn't get started, but it makes me happy.
Love it. Love it. Thank you.